So I was writing 3 A4 pages a day to get me through some of the darker times. And what I found was that I would learn so much about myself through that. I could work through the angst. I could see things differently, see life differently. And I'm a bit like you. You said, it got you through college. I'm a bit like it got me through the dark times. I was so honest on the page because nobody was ever going to read any of this. Hmm.
We have a deeper level of truth within us already, and we can access that in different ways.
Yeah,
And one of the ways that we can do that is through writing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's maybe it's not all writing. I don't know. Maybe you can kind of stumble upon it in other types of writing, but it really seems like it's this reflective writing. It's this writing where you have an intention to explore a deeper space, to really see what kind of comes up and shows up for you. Cool.
Because that's where all the new and fresh ideas come from when you're in the present moment, isn't it? You're not worrying about the past, not thinking about what the future's going to bring, just here now. That's when your insights come through. So that's how it exactly works in the writing.
You might be expecting this podcast to discuss hot baths, meditation techniques, and breathing exercises. But really, those are only just pressure releases, and they don't fix the true cause. The true issue is a contracted mind. And a contracted mind creates stress, upset, frustration, and impatience. A relaxed mind creates inspiration, connection, fresh ideas, and solutions to intractable problems. We're going to explore how you can relax into presence. This is the Releasing Mental Tension podcast with Rich Life.
What if writing could be your best friend? What if it could be a tool to help you have a little bit more clarity, a little bit more peace, and a little bit more wisdom? If that is interesting to you, if you'd like to use writing in a way that really helps benefit your life, then join me for a conversation with my guest, Maria Iliffe-Wood. She is a author and a British author whose writing practice has been the foremost of her life for many years. Writing for her is more than a craft. It's a way of making sense of the world, a source of resilience through dark times, and a means of connecting with others on the deepest human levels. One of the writers that works with her, she also works with writers, they said that the process of working with her is like finding their wings. It's a phrase that captures the empowerment Maria loves to nurture. She believes that stories, whether poetry, memoir, fiction, or anything else, have the power to heal, inspire, and connect us. And she champions the voices of those who feel called to write, ensuring their stories find their way into the world. Welcome, Maria. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. That was a really lovely introduction.
Yeah, well,
Really nice.
it's great to have you. And I did a class with you a little bit ago. I was earlier this year,
Hmm.
like back in May, June timeframe. And it was called Writing from Mind. And I really got a lot out of it because I love writing. In fact, it brought me through college. I failed out of my first semester of college, and I found out that I fell in love with writing in that second semester in one of the courses that I took. And it was the only reason, well, I probably would have been okay, but it was one of the things that guided me toward finishing my education And it was something that I kind of put into the background. So I want to thank you actually for really getting me back into the writing process with
Oh,
that
nice.
course. It was really
Nice.
wonderful. So today we're going to be exploring a conversation about how to use writing as a way to find more clarity and peace in your life.
Mm.
And it sounds like you've done that from some of the stories that you shared in the writing class. Could
Mm.
you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so um, I didn't fall in love with writing straight away in the early days. So a bit like you, I was, because I think in America they talk about college, and here we talk about university. We're talking about the same kind of level, aren't we?
Yeah.
And so for my university, my coaching qualifications that I did at university, which I didn't do until in my mid-30s, I had to do reflective writing to get through the course. So I had to reflect on every coaching session that I did as part of the assignments. And I really fought with that idea. And I had conversations with my tutor. I was absolutely doing my best to try and find a way of getting through the course without having to do the reflective writing, because I hated it. But something happened during the course of that year, because once I'd finished the course and I didn't have to do the reflective writing anymore, I just carried on.
Hmm.
And then I was doing, just at the beginning, I was just reflecting on my coaching practice and carried on doing that. And it was always, that was really, really insightful, because I would reflect on what I said and what I did and what questions I asked and what interventions I'd used and how they reacted and what was going on for the client. And it really enabled me to see the coaching clients I was working with, because I've been working with coaches. My coaching qualification was not my first coach training. Like, I did my first coach training in 1983. So I'd done a lot of coach training, but I didn't have a piece of paper that said I could do it. So I was already working with clients, even though I was just doing this qualification. So and what it enabled me to do was see more deeply the people that I was working with, noticing the nuances, seeing what I could do differently, that kind of thing. Before I would go for my supervision, and then I would go for my supervisions. And because I'd reflected so deeply in the writing, my supervisions were enabled me to reflect even more deeply about my coaching practice and things like that. And so anyway, I then started working in the early days of my business. I started working with a business mentor who was absolutely brilliant. And I was also going through quite a difficult time, in that I'd lost my dad, I'd lost my grandparents, I'd lost my best friend. And she suggested to me, because we must have somewhere along the line got talking about the writing, she suggested that I follow Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which is the morning pages. A lot of people know them as the morning pages. So I was writing 3 A4 pages a day to get me through some of the darker times. And what I found was that I would learn so much about myself through that. I could work through the angst. I could see things differently, see life differently. And I'm a bit like you. You said, it got you through college. I'm a bit like, it got me through the dark times. I was so honest on the page, because nobody was ever going to read any of this. And nobody will ever read any of it. There was a point in time I'd been probably doing that kind of morning pages for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. And I decided to send them all to incineration, because I didn't want anybody, after, say I'm not here anymore. The last thing I wanted was my family and my husband and people who knew me to read some of the stuff that was in that writing, because it was, in my dark times, I had not very nice thinking. But being able to put it all on the page, I think, really helped me get through all that time.
There's something that's powerful about kind of getting it out of your head, you know, and on somewhere else, onto a page, onto a journal, onto a computer, that just I think is really helpful for people, because for some people they think that they need to kind of keep things in their head, otherwise they're going to forget. And then they give themselves permission in a way to kind of let it go when they put it somewhere on a page. They've marked it down.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's like taking all of the thinking out of your head and putting it in front of you so you can see it. And I think one of the differences now that, the thing that I didn't understand then that I understand now, come across the three principles a few years ago, is that I don't have to believe all of that anymore. Even when I was putting it all on the page, I didn't have the understanding that that was all a whole lot of thinking that was, often conditioned, habitual, loops, looping patterns of thinking. And, I've just, at the invitation of a friend of mine, I've just started doing some morning pages again, because I wanted to get back into writing just for myself that nobody else is going to see. Because over the years, with writing the books, with writing articles to go out to people, and because I'm talking about writing a lot of the time that I'm writing, always in the back of my mind is the fact that this might be something I might publish. And so I wanted to get back to, let me write something that is only for me and nobody else. And it's kind of reminded me, doing that again is reminding me of how I use the writing to process things, understand things, see things, which is different now to what it was when I was first doing morning pages, with a different spiritual understanding.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I really wanted to talk about kind of the difference between maybe a writing for clarity and setting an intention for that, versus other types of writing. Because I tried a whole bunch of different writing. I tried fear journaling when I was going through some of my most challenging times. I did affirmation writing every single morning and every single evening. And like you said, it just, in some ways, it reinforced some of what I really believed, and it wasn't helpful in that way. But now the way that I use writing is to help clarify my thinking, to help see maybe where the inconsistencies are that you're talking about. And that can help to bring a little bit more clarity to my mind. So it seems like you've kind of, it's the chicken or the egg thing, right? It's like what comes first, the understanding of how the mind works, that three principles understanding. Or can we also find that through writing?
Well, my first book was a book called Coaching Presence. And I wrote it before I came across the principles. In fact, I handed the manuscript in on the Wednesday and went to my first principles conference on the Saturday. And that was my first introduction to the principles. And while I was writing the book, so the writing of that first book came from this deep reflective practice, this having the coaching sessions, reflecting on the processes. For some reason, the word invisible came to me. I started reflecting using the word invisible. How was I invisible? How was I visible in the coaching practice? and came up with this whole model. But at the core of it was this thing called the invisible coach. And people have read that who know the principles and have said to me, Maria, did you write this before you knew the principles or after? Because I can't tell. And on the way to the conference, because Ash, my husband, he'd been saying to me, he'd read Michael Neill's book, The Inside Out Revolution. And he was saying to me, you've got to read this. You've got to read this. I've got to tell you about this. And I'm going, no, I'm writing my book. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I was writing my book. And when on the way to the conference, I said to Ash, he was telling me a bit more about these principles things. I said, this better not undermine my book I've just spent 6 months writing. And the thing was, it didn't. In fact, what it did is it reinforced what was in the book, the understanding of the principles, because all the things that I was saying in that book, the principles were saying too. Like, we have this inner guide. This is what was in the book. We have this invisible coach, was the phrase I used, but we have this inner guide that is not broken, doesn't need fixing, and helps us through everything. And that's what I'm pointing people to in my work. And I understood that because of the deep reflection that I did about the coaching practice. So it is a bit chicken and egg. Does the understanding come first or does it not come first? Because deep in the heart of us, we all understand it even before. Like, you don't have to know the principles for the principles to be working through you, because it's not principles. It's just how our life works. So, that really told me that we know this stuff already. It's coming from a deeper place. And I think I've just gone off on a tangent. I've just lost the thread of where I was going, so I'll stop there for a minute.
Call it a pit stop. No, that is really incredible, because it seems like through the process of writing, you touched a deeper space. And this is a space that we all have. And if you're listening and you're like, what is the principles thing that she's talking about? It's something that I use in my coaching and Maria uses in her coaching. And it's called the 3 Principles Understanding. And it was discovered, and you could say that, by a man named Sydney Banks. So it's a really great deep dive if you're wanting to explore something that really is life-changing.
Yeah.
But what you were speaking to is that we have those principles working through us. We have a deeper level of truth within us already. And we can access that in different ways.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that we can do that is through writing.
Yeah.
And it's not all writing. I don't know. Maybe you can kind of stumble upon it in other types of writing, but it really seems like it's this reflective writing. It's this writing where you have an intention to explore a deeper space, to really see what kind of comes up and shows up for you. You're creating an opening. So maybe I'm really curious, and I bet our listeners are curious, how do you write in a reflective way to reveal some of this truth that you have within yourself? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? What's going through my mind at the minute is some people talk about stream of consciousness writing. And I don't think that's it. I don't think I've ever done stream of consciousness writing. I think you're right that there is something there about an intention. And I'm not sure if, when I first started doing this kind of reflective writing where I was going into deeper into myself, whether I would have been sitting down and saying, okay, I've got an intention for clarity. So, for example, when I was first reflecting, I definitely had an intention because it was always about the coaching practice. Like all my first writings were just about my coaching practice. Then when I started doing the morning pages, I was following the Artist's Way morning pages for a period of time. But then I kind of moved away from that but carried on with that kind of morning pages free flow without sticking to the Julia Cameron exercises, because through the book you've got exercises to do every day of the 12-week program. So I don't know that I sat down thinking I have an intention to get greater clarity. But I think when I look back, I think I did have the intention without it being expressed. Do you know what I mean? It's like I would sit down to write, and because it was never for anybody else, it was only ever for me. Because after I wrote my first book, I didn't think I was ever going to write another one. Like I thought that was me, that was me done. Thank you very much. My one book that was inside me was out, and that was it. So it wasn't that I was writing because I thought I was going to write any more books. I'd gone back to I'm doing this for me and no other reason. And so I think in the back of my mind, I probably did have that kind of intention, but it felt more like, it's almost like I was writing to find out what kinds of things I thought. And I was writing to find out what the writing was going to tell me. Because I'd had so many experiences of seeing something on the page that was like, oh my God, I didn't know that. But now I've written that, it makes perfect sense. Like something is coming through that is informing me about, and it could be about anything. It could be about the thoughts I had about another person, the thoughts I had about myself, about the thoughts about how life works. Of course, then when you come across something like this, a spiritual understanding, that's going to start coming into, so sort of questioning, well, what's that about? Is that what I believed? Is that what I think is true? Is it true that I don't have to believe all of my thinking? And sometimes I would ask myself questions, and other times I'd just write. But I think I always had a bit of an intention of finding something out that I didn't know already, without it being an intellectual knowledge. It's not something I could go and look up in a book. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I feel like it does. Because especially the part of finding out something new. Because I think that we are creating an opening, we're kind of creating an invitation for something new to come through when we sit down to write. We don't necessarily want to rehash all of the thinking that we've had in the past, and we can do that. And then sometimes that clears a way for new thinking to come through, for new, in the three principles, we call them insights, for new insights to come through. But I think that is a big piece of it, to really sit down and say, The other thing that I really notice is you're coming to it with some curiosity. You are really interested. You're coming to it with a knowing that there is something more to see.
Yeah, and even if I think I'm writing about something I think I know about already, that's the approach that I come to it from. So this was something I learned through the method writing. So I have studied Jack Great's method writing for several years now, and I'm now teaching it alongside Jules Swales. But one of the things that you do with the method writing that you get taught fairly early is to write with nothing on your mind. And that was what I was doing all those years of, just writing on the page, not really coming to it thinking this is what I'm going to write about today. So writing with nothing on my mind was not a new concept for me. It was easy for me to keep going with it. And the method writing takes you writing in a whole different direction. But so say today, I think, okay, I'm going to write about editing, for example. So I know what my topic is, but what I get really interested in is not working out what it is that I want to say. Like, I don't think, okay, this is what I'm going to say about editing. I want to make this, and this, and this. And, I have all this outline of things that I want to do. I still sit and be curious about what's going to show up if I write about editing or whatever the topic is that I'm going to write about. I wrote one of my newsletters. I talked about some walking and on a footpath near me, where I saw some tiny little frogs crossing the pathway, and I'd read the book Braiding Sweetgrass by, I can't remember her name. Her surname is Chimera, I think. I can't remember her first names, but Braiding Sweetgrass, it's a lovely book, and she talked about in there about going and protecting the salamanders as they cross the road. So I knew when I sat down to write, I knew that I was going to write about seeing these tiny little baby frogs on the pathway, because I don't think I would have seen them if I hadn't have read that book and noticed and her talked about the salamanders. And so that's all I knew that I was going to write about. I knew that was going to feature somewhere in this article that I wrote. And the article turned into writing about how writing impacts other people's lives. So I sat down to write that article, just being curious about what would show up if I have that just as a topic. So even when I know what I'm going to write about, I have that curiosity about what's going to come through, rather than determining what I'm going to put out there into the world.
Well, that kind of is one of the keys, I feel like, because I think that there's a lot of people out there that want everything laid out ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of want to play the writing thing like a chess match where they have the whole game planned out in advance. But you can't write that way. You can. I feel like, there's a lot of ways that you can write that way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a lot of successful writers write that way, and they put it all together ahead of time.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's not a great way to write for clarity. And instead of trying to plan everything out, trying to have the whole outline created, you can show up to your writing and then you respond. It's kind of like that chess game where they move and then you move, and it's almost like a dance.
Yeah.
You're dancing. I don't know who you're dancing with. Maybe your intuition and mind and clarity. But that's kind of what you do.
I think that there are people who plan the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going, or plan out the whole article, when you're going into it like that, what you're doing is you're writing to let people know what you know already. That you're sharing the knowledge that you've accumulated. Now, my guess is people who sit down and write, whether they write novels or whether they write fact-based books or self-help books, where they know everything that they're going to say in advance. I'm sure just the process of sitting down and being present with the page, something will show up. But I think that if you're not looking for the things to show up, you might not spot them. So I suspect that people, sometimes you read a novel and there's a great line in a novel, isn't there? And you think, oh wow, that's so wise. And I often think, I wonder if the author spotted that when they wrote it. And so they're not giving, when you're writing with that whole idea of what you're going to write, then you're not going to have any surprises for yourself. And if there's no surprise, David White says, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. So the thing that I love about Jack Grape's method writing is that it's a whole way of writing whereby you focus on the way you write rather than what you write. And that's been one of the biggest shifts in my writing in terms of being surprised and seeing what comes out in the writing. It's almost like the method writing says, let me give your intellect something to think about, to focus on, so that this, whatever this is that comes through you, has the space to turn up and show up on the page. And so many people that come and they practice, they do these exercises, and they're surprised and delighted by some of the things that they write. And personally, my second and my fourth book came through just practicing the writing for classes. And then I'd get so far through and think, oh, this looks like it might be a book. And the book's half written even before I was writing the book.
It's funny how that happens. Something else that you said that I really think is important for people to hear is that you want to give it space for the writing to come through. And something that I found really powerful in the class was maybe it was something that I heard or something that you said or both, but I really heard that time spent sitting down in front of a blank page, not writing, just kind of reflecting, is not a failure. It's not wasted time.
Mm.
There was that story that Bonnie said that where she shared that she had all of these false starts for this big project that she had. And she was so stressed about it. And then when it was like, a couple weeks away, it just all came out. And you said, well, you know what? All of those false starts were the steps for you to be able to have that writing come out. And I think we can miss that. And I think we can get frustrated with the process of it instead of embracing the process of it, knowing that time spent just maybe not even writing at all, but percolating, you might say.
Yeah, totally.
That's valuable.
Yeah. So the conversation I have with a lot of people is people get fixed on an idea of what their writing process should look like. Now, I've written and published 4 books now, and every single one of them has had a different writing process. And so what I get people to pay attention to is what is the process that is emerging for them, as opposed to what are they doing or not doing that they think they should or shouldn't be doing. And so for a lot, for some people, that percolating, that thinking about it, that mulling it all over is part of their writing process, even before it's written on the page. For some people, it's writing scrappy notes. For some people, it's bullet journals. For some people, it's taking themselves into a forest for 4 weeks. Like Linda Sandell Pettit does sometimes. She takes herself away to a cabin in the mountains, and that's her writing process. Amy Johnson, I had an interview with her. She would take herself off to a hotel for a couple of days and write. When I was writing my first book, like it got to a point when I was writing 14-hour days. for that first book because I had a deadline, which was a very tight deadline, in which I, being none the wiser about how long it would take me to write a book, I agreed to a 6-month deadline and then worked my absolute socks off to meet the deadline, not realizing that I could have just contacted them and said, excuse me, but could I extend the deadline? It never occurred to me. So 14-hour days I was spending on that. A Caged Mind I did in pretty much in 15-minute increments, because I was writing that at such a busy time in my life. I knew that if I was going to get it done, I had to do it little and often. So I would, I have a bullet journal for everything. I would have 15 minutes writing, and some days I'd spend 15 minutes, and some days I'd spend 3 hours. But most days, I'd like 15 minutes. I need to spend 15 minutes on this today. So every book that I've written has had an entirely different process. So what you want to be looking out for is what's the process that is emerging for you. What's your process, rather than what do you think it should look like. What your process looks like is different to what my process looks like, and my processes look different for every book that I've written. Mm-hmm. And some authors write book after book after book after book with exactly the same process for every single book. So there isn't a right or wrong way of doing it.
Yeah, I think that's so important to hear, that you can kind of block yourself with this judgment of, oh, it needs to look this certain way. Like you were talking about in the course, that you journal when you write, and you do it on a journal, and then you transfer it into a computer.
Yeah.
And for me, that just wouldn't work. Like I typically started, the way that I started to write now is that I'm writing at 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, while my daughter is still asleep. I'm in bed. I'm just using my phone.
Yeah.
And then I can edit it, and I've got a lot of things backed up where I've just written like that for months, and now it's time to edit them, and now I have the space for that because I'm super busy too. Like I have a 20-month-old daughter, part-time stay-at-home dad. I have a business. I do body work. I stay fairly busy, and I'm finding the time to write. And sometimes all it takes is that space of 15 minutes. And there are days when I don't write. And that's
and me too.
Yeah. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't beat myself up over that or get mad at myself, but I will try and have the intention of writing the next day if that happens.
Yeah. So the thing that I like about handwriting is that when I type it up, that's when it gets my first edit. And I'm actually working on another memoir at the minute, and it's a lot of writing, which means a lot of typing up. And so for a period of time, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try going straight to typing. Now, when I write articles, I just go straight to typing. I don't handwrite those. It's just easier just to go straight into typing them up. But when I was writing the memoir at my computer, what I was finding is that I was editing myself all the way through. So the flow that I would get into with handwriting, I would just write and keep on writing and keep on writing. When I was doing it on the computer, I was going, oh no, I need to add that bit in, and I need to move that bit, and then I need to change that word. And so I would find that I would edit, and when I'm editing as I go along, I know that I'm stopping that creative flow for me. It doesn't happen when I'm writing articles, which kind of says can't be true then. But
but You would
Yeah.
think that writing would be the exception of a thought created reality, but
Yeah,
apparently our thoughts
absolutely.
have something to do with it. I just,
And that also is a very good point, because one of the things, because quite a few of the writers that I'm working with they have got a spiritual understanding. They do know about the principles, or they've got a different spiritual understanding. And yet, when they sit down to write, they think that they shouldn't have all of this noise that gets in the way. And what I try and help people to see is that no matter what we're doing, we have noise. So why are we expecting to write without noise? We don't get into that. I don't get into that space of Zen where I'm totally clear of thinking, and I'm not. I'm looking at my writing, thinking this is boring, or this isn't very good, or who's going to want to read this? Who's going to be interested in that? Like, we all have all of that thinking, but we write anyway, regardless of all of that thinking. And so, people who have got a 3P understanding, they come along and they understand all of that. But for some reason, it's like, well, I shouldn't be having all of this thinking. I've got all of this. It's getting in my way. And so, well, yeah, you're paying all of this noise a bit too much attention. That maybe in another part of your life, you're not paying it quite so much attention, because in my first book, there's a haiku that says, I know not to trust my thinking unless it wishes me well. And that's kind of the way that I look at all of that noise that's going on while I'm writing. Me paying attention to, well, there's a slightly, even as I said it, there's like a slightly different angle to that as well. But me going, oh, this is boring, or this is not good, or this is terrible, or who's going to write that? There's not a lot of point to me paying attention to that inflated noise that's been made. But one thing that I would say about that, so just recently I was writing my memoirs, and I had three or 4 days where I was writing, and I was thinking, this is boring. But what was interesting was it didn't have that, oh God, Maria, this is terrible. It's so terrible, it's boring. It didn't have that flavor to it. It was a flavor of, this is boring and you need to do something different with it. And so it's kind of, especially if you're writing for, to publish something, I want to publish this book at some point. I do want to make sure that the writing is dynamic and interesting and undulating, and, gets my messages across. And, the writing is about a particularly difficult period in my life. I need to give the reader some relief. I need to give them some backstory. I need to give them some humor. And so, sometimes there's these voices that talk to you, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a voice I need to pay attention to, because there is something in this. So it's getting to understand which flavors are you paying attention to, and which not.
yeah, I've noticed that too with my writing, because there's the reverse too. There's like, I'm really jazzed about this, and then
Oh
you
yeah.
look back at it like in 6 months, and it's like, this is this needs a lot of work for it to be really kind of more palatable.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is one of the best gifts that we can give ourselves when we're writing. And when we're writing anything, when we're writing for clarity or writing to publish, is to withhold judgment.
Yeah.
Is to just be, and even if you have that judgment, that noise, to be really curious about what it's telling you. Because it might be resistance. It might be like, I want to distract myself away from this because this is kind of uncomfortable to try and say these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be something that you really need to say and really need to write down. Or like you found, it could be telling you, this is a great base, but it needs some extra seasoning.
Yeah.
Kind of like cooking, the cooking metaphor when you're writing, you know.
Yes.
You don't have to throw out the whole pot of whatever you're cooking up. Sometimes it needs a little bit of seasoning or some extra ingredients, and that
Yeah.
just takes it to another level.
Another level. Yeah.
And sometimes you do want to throw it out, and you can throw it out. That's fine. That's the great thing, too. You get to decide.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
your journey.
Yeah.
You can throw it in the incinerator. You can keep it and read about it in 20 years. You can publish it and put it on display for so many eyes to see. That's the thing I think a lot of people get stuck on because they're like, well, I need to do something with it. It
Yeah. Yeah.
needs to be productive in some way. It needs to
Yeah.
have a point. And I
Yeah.
loved that about what you said, that I think you had a couple of quotes that were so powerful that the writing's at its best when there's no point to it.
Yeah. If you start it, if your starting point is, I don't know what the point is, or
Hmm.
yeah, or whether there's a point to this writing or not.
Yeah. I forgot the quote. I loved it. It was like something like we have to we have to write out our sillies, kind of, basically.
I'm not sure which one that is.
I'm really, really poorly paraphrasing. I you
But
have
the thing is, it doesn't matter what goes on the page
hmm,
when you're. And I think this is, sometimes, I'm writing about this journey from last year. There are things that I'm writing that I'm pretty certain are going to get edited out, because there are people I don't want to offend by some of the things that I'm writing. But I need to write them to be true in the first instance, because if I start censoring myself with things like that, then where else am I censoring myself? So I don't want to censor myself on the page. And this is the thing a lot of people can't get their head around. I'm writing about this person who did some really horrible things to me, and said, yeah, maybe you are, and you need to write them. I'm not saying you need to write them. What I'm saying is, and they're coming out on the page. So you need to write them, and you decide. You said about this earlier. You decide what gets put out into the public domain. Just because you've written it and put it down on a piece of paper doesn't mean anybody else gets to read it. And that's the beauty. So the thing for me is, like, some people will say, oh, it's all come from mind, and so it's all just perfect on the page. I've not yet, I'm not saying never, but I've not yet come across a piece of writing that's come from mind, because it's all come from mind, that is perfect on the page, ready for publication. Because it seems to me like mind wants us to have some skin in the game. Like, we don't get anything served to us on a plate, do we, without doing anything? So just, it takes something to show up. Stephen Pressfield says, you put your butt in the chair and the muse will show up, but the muse won't show up until you've put the butt in your chair. So you've got to do your bit. And then when it comes on the page, it always needs some work doing it to make it into a palatable, interesting, entertaining, educating piece of writing. It always needs some work doing on it. I mean, you can publish it just as it is, but those pieces of writing don't tend to make much of an impression, because mine didn't intend you to just vomit it out there, for want of a better word.
hmm. So I'm curious too. when we're going to sit down to write, and when we are going to have that intention of writing for clarity, whether we edit it or not, whether we do anything with it or not, like you said, if you want to put it somewhere, you're probably going to need to edit it. That's probably going to need to be a piece of it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to worry about that right now.
No.
I think we tend to worry about that. And you were talking about how that can really inhibit your flow if you are so focused on that. So let's pretend that the person who's listening to this would like to write for clarity and would like to do that right now. Right after this episode is over, they're going to go over to their computer or their journal or their phone.
Yeah.
And they're going to write something that's going to help them see a little bit more about themselves.
Yeah.
What would be something that you would say to them right now?
Perfect. So I would say to them, this is the very, very first lesson that we teach, Jules Fells and I, on the Jack Grapes method writing. The very first thing we teach is people locate themselves. So you sit down. So if I was going to write a piece now, I would write, I'm sat in my office, I'm on my cream leather chair, I'm in front of my computer, in front of this lovely Tudor style desk, got the pen in my hand, I can see the pens in front of me. I feel hot. The room is slightly dark because because I've got the curtains closed, because the sun was shining through the window too strong. I'm a bit warm in this cardigan now. I'm feeling, how am I feeling? I go, oh yeah, I'm feeling contented with this conversation. I'm feeling happy with this conversation. It's been a lovely conversation. And so that's what I would write on the page. And then I would see where it takes me. And we call that locating. And it's all in present tense. It's all right here, right now. It's not what we did yesterday. It's not what we're thinking about doing later in the evening. It's just locating ourselves here. And it's almost like we're just getting present totally with the here and now. And what happens in the here and now, something has the space to come through. So that's what I would say to people. Blank piece of paper. What you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're tasting, what you're smelling right now.
It's almost like you're drawing yourself in to the moment using writing. And that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's really cool. Yeah. And I can tell you as well that most of my daily journal entries, if you were to pick up my journal, most of them will say, I'm sitting on the sofa, I'm wearing my dressing gown, got my journal on my lap, because that's where I start writing every single day. But every single day, something different shows up as I start to write that, because I notice different things in the room on different days. You know, different things show up in my mind. I'm feeling differently on different days. So even though that first sentence is pretty much always the same sentence, the writing that follows is never the same.
Because you're inviting something fresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Because that's where all the new and fresh ideas come from when you're in the present moment, isn't it? You're not worrying about the past, not thinking about what the future's going to bring, just here now. That's when your insights come through. So that's how it exactly works in the writing.
I know that people are going to want to try that. So if they would like more help with exploring that, how could they reach out to you? Where could they find you?
I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, and I have my website, which is iliffe-wood.co.uk. And you'll also find me on Jules Swale's website as well, because I teach my method writing in her school. So they're the various places that they can get hold of me.
Cool. And if they're curious about your books, I'd love for you to share the titles of them. And
Oh, blimey.
I will put all of this in the show notes as well.
Mm-hmm. So the first book was called Coaching Presence, and the subtitle of that is Building Consciousness and Awareness into Coaching Interventions. It's a nice snappy subtitle. The second book was The Daily Yarns, which was the roller coaster of emotions of the lockdown. That was the second book that I published, as opposed to the second book that I wrote. The third book that I published, which was the second one that I wrote, is A Caged Mind: How a Spiritual Understanding Changed a Life, obviously my life. And then the fourth book, which is entirely different, is called This One Life. And it's poetry inspired by the Duino elegies, Rainer Maria Rilke's Duino elegies. And that's poetic explorations of, I can't remember the subtitle of that, but grief and life. And I ask all the existential questions in that. And I had a few answers come to me in that writing. But yes, that's the 4 books.
Great. So appreciate your time and your presence and your wisdom today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for a lovely, lovely conversation. Great questions.
Thanks.
Great sharing.
This is the Releasing Mental Tension podcast with Rich Life. I'm on a mission to help people release their mental tension because I know that it helps them to be more capable, creative, and compassionate human beings. And I need your help. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like more resources, visit richliferealization.com. Your vibrant life is a single thought away.